In this video, what I'm going to do is walk you through exporting a ready-to-go Figma document through Xenon to get it into Oxygen. So what I've done already is prepared this document using auto layouts as much as possible for the best results in our export. For more information on how to use auto layouts, click the link in the description below or the article on xenonapp.com. And the other thing I've done is already uploaded my images to my WordPress media library. The other thing is avoid using vector images where possible, because otherwise you're left with a ton of blank image placeholders as opposed to using a regular graphic where you're going to be left with the standalone image as one placeholder. So what I'm ready to do now is go ahead and grab my Figma document ID. So if you look up in the URL bar, what I want is the document ID, which is this right here. Yours is of course going to look different, but it will be similar. Then come over here to Xenon, click on the settings tab, go to Figma document ID, paste that in and click on update, then go to the dashboard tab. Now what we're going to do is click on select all elements. We're going to remove the Figma page container and instead we're just going to select everything beneath that and click on generate. Now you can see how fast it generated and I can click to copy these shortcodes. At this point, what I'm going to do is move into an Oxygen template or page. I can go ahead and click this plus shortcodes, paste these in, update my design, and then click edit with Oxygen. So here is the imported layout. The first thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and add some of your images so you can get things looking much closer to how they would have before. Now again, this wasn't using a vector graphic. However, if I had used a regular image, I would have the correctly sized placeholder here. The other minor things you need to do is something like change width to 100%. You can see our space between our middle align and our horizontal layout are all imported from Figma automatically. Next up, I could go ahead and swap out this image, which is this calendar right here. And things are already starting to look a heck of a lot better. Now, some of these other things, these image placeholders are a rectangle, but you can go ahead and just swap these icons over. You can see how much faster it is once you have your icons already uploaded. And I'll go ahead and stick these in. There is of course minor alignment things you need to adjust, like this div container here looks like it has some extra margin on top, so we can go ahead and remove that. Same thing over there, but you can kind of get the idea. Next up, we would go ahead and swap these graphics out. So here is what I was talking about, where you're going to have the correctly sized image already ready to go. So if I go ahead and find my step 1 graphic, which is this one right here, if I select that and pop it in, then it is already correctly sized for me. Now there is some minor deviation from the layout with this div because of course it was a rectangle. So we would probably want to go ahead and change this container to something like stretch. And then we could take this div and remove this margin on top. We could change this to something like top align. And then we could make this div have a layout with a flex grow of 1. And then you might consider going border, left, and then there's the color right there. In our design though, it is a dotted border. So if I change this a little bit, you can kind of see it right there. I'll change that back down to 2 or even 1 pixels like it was before. And then you would need to make this more circular than it is, of course. Now this text actually would need to be wrapped in another div to middle align this, but that's just kind of an oversight from Figma. That's not something I had anticipated when it got to the real world. So this is just a practical example of what this is going to look like. The other thing you might consider doing is on this div, choosing a center align, which is something I forgot to do in Figma, but you can see how much easier it is to start adjusting these graphics and adjusting your alignment and minor spacing things when everything is already there. It's far, far easier to work with a completed design like this and make it perfect rather than starting from the very beginning. Now here's an example of what I talked about where using vector graphics turns into a bunch of placeholders, so just be mindful of that. Of course, this isn't particularly hard. I can just open my structure panel. If I come down to these images, I could just basically remove this entire group of them, remove that div, and then instead I could just open this image. I'm not sure which one it was here, but it was probably that. And there you go. We also had our little house icon. We used Facebook and Instagram icons right here. So I would probably change this to an actual icon element in Oxygen. I would want to set my footer container here to be 100% width. Same thing with this container here. I'm going to change this to 100% also. And there we go. So I will go ahead and delete this group of images right here, delete that div. And I want to swap these images to make it look more real. So I will remove this div, that div, and then this image. And that's close enough for me for now. I do want this to be centered, so I'm going to change that to center. And now I want to save and look at this on the front end. So here is our layout. It looks really, really close. There definitely is a little bit more work to do. Things like alignment and paddings and things like that might need a tad more work. But if you take advantage of utility classes, that will make it a heck of a lot easier. But you can see how far along. So in a matter of, roughly 5 to 7 minutes, we have nearly an entire header, footer, and page content done. So you don't have to manually build this out. You can just basically clean it up. And as you probably know by now, our goal with this tool was to reduce your development time by as much as 75%. And I would argue that we did that in this case. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I really appreciate this. For more information, click the links in the description below or visit xenonapp.com. I so look forward to seeing what you can produce with Xenon, so definitely share it with us, and I'll look forward to seeing you in a future video.